Hello, welcome to today's webinar on starting and advancing a career in the minerals industry with speaker Benedikt Steiner. My name is Deanne Ryder. I'm the online community manager with FSEG and the webinar coordinator for this series. I will first cover some logistical items for the webinar, and then we'll move into a quick overview of FSEG before Benedikt actually begins. If you have any problems accessing Zoom, here's a few technical tips. Make sure your browser is compatible, and if your screen freezes, Control F5 should help to refresh the browser, and that often fixes the problems. And that's true for the visual and audio. If your computer audio still has problems, and you've already clicked the Join Audio button found in the bottom control panel, you can call into the conference line. Your international ID numbers can be found using the link zoom.us/Zoom conference, and you'll need to enter the webinar ID found below, the 168-678-735 number. Today's call will be listen only, but we do encourage you to ask questions during the webinar using the Q&A button found in your control panel. You can type that button and it'll pop up with a window similar to this that will show up for all the panelists. And we will take questions during the Q&A session. There'll be 2 of them midway through the webinar itself. Today's webinar is part of a 4-part series, and we encourage you to sign up to the other webinars, which are part of this series now. Here's the schedule for the upcoming webinars and the link where it is found on the FSEG website. And as a note, today's webinar will be archived. It is being recorded and will be archived and sent out to all attendees so that you can check back on any section that you missed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian Hole, the FSEG Executive Director. Brian?
Thanks, Deanne, and from my side, a personal welcome to everybody. We've got a very diverse audience, both in terms of where you are calling in from, as well as the level of your experience. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here and a few slides, and Deanne is going to drive the slide side of things, just so that we don't experience any lags, and then we'll get you over to Benedikt shortly after that to get on with the business of the webinar. So what I want to basically give a bit of an idea of is just where this program fits into FSEG's overall educational offerings. So that's going to require a little bit of a background, which I think will be especially useful to those of you who are not members, and there are quite a few of you. So perhaps at this point then, Deanne, if you can just give me the first slide. This is a picture from a location in Arizona called Moss Mine, where we have probably one of our more popular programs. It's a field course run by Bill Chavez and Eric Peterson, Ralph Gonzalez. It's something that we believe strongly in, the hands-on type of training that is very often absent in many university programs. And we fill a gap there, and it is in direct response to what industry is looking for. So you might wonder, where the society sort of came from, how it happened, in the way that it did. We started with the journal in 1905. We were founded in 1920, so that tells you that our anniversary is next year. A lot of the things we're doing now are in response to both that anniversary year and also much needed feedback from groups like students and early career professionals on whom we focus quite strongly now. That is a very rapidly growing sector in the FSEG. So a foundation was then also formed in the mid-60s to increase our sort of fundraising arm of the society, and then again the Canada Foundation at the turn of the century in 2000. So I'll move over from this slide to another one, which will just give you a little bit of a background on the actual membership. I mean, everybody makes the claim, or just about everybody as a society, that they are international. So it's always good to sort of look under the hood and see what exactly that means. To us, what that is if we look at it from the US perspective, we have fewer than a quarter of our members in the US, and we have almost 60% outside of North America. So we are truly international, and the map at the bottom there gives you, in terms of the depth of shade, gives you some sense of where the membership is particularly dense, but you can see that it is very widespread. This is also reflected in the student chapter structure, which has just grown astronomically since the very first one was formed in the late 80s. And we are now in many countries, many student chapters, and the funding is significant to those groups. It's a competitive type of funding. But again, it's a group that provides extraordinarily good feedback to us on what the types of programs are that students and early career professionals are looking for. So you can see there in the little pie chart, there's the level of students, 26%. May not sound like a lot, but understand that historically it was far less. When I came aboard the FSEG, we were below 10% students. So that has grown strongly. And also the component within that student group of women in particular has actually become a very sort of robust part of the membership. We are industry dominated, but it has to be said that the great majority of the educational offerings are actually coming from academia. But our academics are somewhat special in that many, if not most of them, have a foot in either camp, a bit like Benedikt. They have both an industry affiliation and they're working in, say, academia, and that provides something quite unique to our members. So I'm going to move from this slide then to the next one, which is actually quite an interesting little map that you can actually get live updates on our website. Gives you just a bit more granularity to what we're talking about, where these student chapters are. And you click on these little bubbles and it gives you the details on where the chapter is, who runs it. Each chapter has a little executive committee for, and then there are, of course, a number of members of each of those chapters. So it's something that has been growing especially well in recent years. So next slide. So this is really the final part of my pitch. I think what I'd like to say here is that for those of you who are not members, you know, we put a lot of store on the term economic in economic geology and the Society of Economic Geologists. So we rely on you to figure out what the return on your investment is. You pay dues, what do you get for it? So have a look at us, you know, stack us up against any of the other societies you might be considering or are already members of, and see how, you know, how that looks to you in terms of the career you're trying to build. So for us, again, as I say, we are focusing very much on the younger part, increasingly the younger part of our society, and those right up to where people are fairly early in their careers. That would be at least, let's say, 5 years of professional experience, maybe a bit more than that. So education and training is a huge thing for us. We're increasingly trying to meet goals in diversity and inclusion in those. The funding is impressive by any society standards. We have a burn rate of about $50,000 a month in actually supporting various aspects of education directed at students. From the traditional part of our education, which is journals and the newsletter and ad hoc publications, we really have been trying to move more through to the sorts of, let's say, educational offerings and services that really matter to early career people. So mentors, networking, And then that brings us to webinars, which I will say in that aspect, we are, this is the inaugural webinar. So, you know, a double welcome in that regard. And we have people like Benedikt to thank for actually really sort of beating on our door about this and persisting and getting the feedback from both students and early career professionals in that this is something they truly need, given the sort of work-life balance that everybody is trying to optimize these days. So then from here, let's go into the actual webinar where I'm about to hand over then to Benedikt, other than to just say that we are again fortunate and thank Benny very much for actually pushing ahead with this, and Deanne in supporting his efforts especially. Benedikt has broad experience both in terms of commodities and the regions that he's actually worked. And I think what you will find here is that he's able to pass along a little bit more than simply a set of techniques and topics that might help you in your career. There's something about a passion in this business that is more than a job. So if this is a career that you're trying to develop or get into, it's one that I think many of us can speak to with a lot more than passing interest. So best of luck in this, enjoy it. I do not believe you will be disappointed at all in this webinar, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to launch this one. Be over to you then, Benedikt.
Thank you, Brian. And a big warm welcome to everyone on the webinar. As it was just mentioned, we've been discussing with the FSEG to run a series of webinars for students and early career professionals. And really our aim is to spread the word of economic geology, and especially the careers and skills that are needed if you're trying to secure a job or advance your career in this line of business. Just going to the next slide. Sorry. So today's topic is starting advancing a career in the minerals industry. And really the ideas behind the series is, as I just said, to raise the awareness of economic geology, and especially for those of you who are considering a career in mining or the minerals industry, really happy to find your feet and get an appreciation of the skills and the job perspective you can expect. So today's discussion will be all about career planning, job search. We will talk about the application process, so how you best submit applications for jobs. We will then talk a bit about interview formalities, and also discuss what is required as a follow-up and advancement of your job or of your career. So let's start off with looking into diversity of careers that you can expect in economic geology. And I've got this slide of the mineral resources development cycle here, and it really shows how mining projects develop over time. As maybe most of you know, this whole process starts off with available land resources. And a company would then claim licenses or claim land to conduct exploration on it. However, many of us work in exploration, but this is just really the very beginning of this entire cycle. After exploration has been completed, that can take up to 10, even 20 years in some cases. This process moves on through environmental impact assessment, construction of a mine site, operation, and closure and reclamation. Now, the good news for everyone is that if you're interested in this minerals industry, in this business, as a geologist, you can work throughout this mineral resources development cycle, whether you're an exploration geologist, a production geologist, or indeed an environmental geologist. The mining industry has really a variety of jobs to go into. And I've just produced this slide here to show you a couple of these classic job titles that you may find when applying for jobs. So assuming you are a graduate geologist, or you're currently studying to be a graduate geologist, and you either have a bachelor's, a master's, or even a PhD, there are really a number of ways that you can choose after university. Well, the first one is, it's not geology related at all. Many geologists seek employment in other sectors, such as finance, or completely outside of geology. That's of course a possibility with a university degree. However, of course, we would like to encourage you to stay with geology and seek a career there. If you are interested more in the environmental engineering aspects of mining or the minerals industry in general, you may well become a surveyor, an environmental geochemist, looking at samples and assessing environmental contamination or pollution, or you may become a rehabilitation specialist. That is, of course, a very, very important role in brownfields locations, so in locations where where mining is ceasing and mines are being closed. Then you have the classic exploration job family, and in exploration, really there's a large diversity of field and office-based roles. I guess the classic role is to be an exploration geologist here, but companies are also looking for exploration geochemists, geophysicists, GIS analysts, database administrators, and junior consultants. Now, junior consultants is a bit of an interesting job title, as in my opinion, a consultant should be someone who's had a number of years work experience, but nevertheless, some companies hire junior consultants. And whilst all the other job titles are probably working for a company, a junior consultant really is working for a consultancy company and helping other companies to improve their workflows. Similar job family exists in mining operations per se. Mining geologists usually work in grade control, in production geology, again as an exploration geologist around mine sites. You can work as a resource geologist, carrying out geostatistics and resource estimations to forecast the grade and tonnages of a mine site. You can become an assistant quarry manager if you're into the industrial minerals industry, such as carbonates, sands, and all the other minerals that we need for construction. You can become a resource modeler, and resource modelers are mainly looking into producing 3D models of ore bodies, using the information that production and grade control geologists are delivering. And again, you can work as a consultant on mining operations. So this really is a slide for you to better appreciate what types of roles you can expect within economic geology and the minerals industry. It's really diverse, and I guess it can satisfy many different interests and personalities. So, out of university, here are some questions that I usually ask people, and that you may want to ask yourself. So, assuming you have just finished university, or maybe in the last couple of years, I guess a good way to start looking into careers is to think about what do you really want. Do you want to stay in academia? Do you want to pursue a master's or PhD degree? Or do you want to experience industry, build up your work experience, obtain all these skills that may advance your career later on? Or are you indeed interested in doing something completely different, such as being a taxi driver, for example? Well, that happens usually during the downturn, but I just put it in here. So really, the first step in planning your career is thinking about what is really interesting you. So before we go into writing cover letters and CVs, I just wanted to give you my own comments to start this off. In my opinion, if you would like to enter the minerals industry, a bachelor's is usually sufficient. That is your first university degree, and it opens you the world to the job sector. However, I highly recommend to study for a master's at a reputable mining school. And that is important because that sets you apart from everyone who's got a bachelor's, and it also gives you specialist knowledge in a specific topic. Master's programs are usually specific in a subject. So it could be there's a master's in environmental science or in exploration geology or in ore deposits. And really these masters, they will help you to get this specialist knowledge that is important when getting a job in mining or in the minerals industry. Another common route that people are going down is that they graduate with a bachelor's, then obtain a number of years work experience, and then come back to university to pursue a master's. And that's not a bad idea at all, because after a couple of years industry experience, you really know what you want, what your interests are. And it's quite common that after graduation at university, you interested in one topic, but then when you experienced economic geology, you're actually fine-tuning your interests. So coming back to university to study for MSc later on is a good idea. A PhD is, in my opinion, not necessary to obtain a first job. However, of course, it's good to have one. And that's for the simple reason that it shows that you have the ability to work on a topic in detail and that you can solve scientific questions. In my opinion, that is very helpful if you would like to advance later on in your career to a specialist position. So for example, if you are an expert in petrography and you like to study minerals, then that may well be a path into ore mineralogy, minerals processing, or geometallurgy. So what I recommend everyone interested in a job in the minerals industry to do is that you build up strong knowledge in geology and preferentially specialize in economic geology if your degree allows you to. Also, a very important topic is that you learn or try to learn foreign languages. So it's not just English that's spoken on mine sites. If you work in West Africa, it's French. If you work in South America, people speak Spanish. If you work in the Eastern former Soviet Union, they speak Russian. And if you operate in Southern Africa, it's Afrikaans that they speak. So that is an advantage to have, to speak multiple languages. And of course, it will also help you to liaise and connect with the locals a lot easier. And I always find that to be a nice icebreaker if you can chat in a foreign language. Okay, so what can you do to prepare yourself for a career? I also believe that you should look into managing projects early on. For example, managing a master's project. Master's projects usually take from 4 months to 6 or 7 months at university. And of course, you need to learn about time management, managing your skills and so on. And that's really a good preparation for finding a job later on, because all these skills like time management, budget management will become very important in a job in industry. Having an internship or summer job over summer is of course very beneficial, because you get to know how businesses work, how mine sites or exploration projects are functioning. And it also allows you to connect and network with people who, if you've done a good job, may offer you a job later on. And of course, speaking here for the FSEG, it's good to engage in professional bodies as well. Brian mentioned earlier that the FSEG is running about 118 student chapters. And that's really, if you like, if you're part of an FSEG chapter and you may be the president or have some other function in it, it's really a playground to obtain these soft skills, obtain these soft skills that are really needed later on. If you start your application, I think what commonly usually worked for me was that you need to be proactive and really take initiative. And if you want a job, then I guess you should try as long as you get it. So don't be disheartened if a job application doesn't work out. If you send off five emails to someone, sometimes it's a number game, and you shouldn't give up even after you send 40 applications or so. That's can be quite common. What I did in the past is I had an Excel sheet to manage my applications. It really helped to keep track of the multiple applications I had on the go. And as I said, it's number game. It's good to know where you're at with different job applications and interviews. So let's move on a bit to career planning. And this is especially important for the early career professionals amongst us. I guess you should think about really what excites you, what makes your job interesting, and what topic in economic geology is really making you feel happy or advance your career. As I said earlier, it is quite normal that your interests will change over time. And I can give you a personal example. When I was at university, I was quite keen on oil and gas and sedimentology. It was only later on, when I was a few years into mining, that I really saw the light and found my passion for exploration geology. So see this as an encouragement to think about your own interests and your own excitements. I believe that if you're a student or an early career professional, I don't think there's any point thinking what you will do in 10 or 20 years. And it's simply because your interests will change, the industry changes, the companies that you work for change. And for that reason, thinking short to medium term time frames, so in other words, 3 to 5 years ahead, will be quite beneficial, will be beneficial to you. I can show you an example later on how it worked out for me and why it doesn't really make sense to think 10 or 20 years ahead of you. Another few aspects that you should consider, and those are quite important in diversified and global minerals industry, is location. What do I mean by that? So the mining industry is very diverse. It's got operations across the world, and very often mining professionals move locations. So they may start off their job in Australia, move over to the US, and then afterwards spend 10 years in Africa. Just an example. So you should really think, what do you want to do? How extensive do you want to travel? If you want to travel a lot, then that should be absolutely a dream job. However, if you're only happy to travel around your own country where you come from, then jobs might be a bit restricted. It depends where you are. You can also consider part-time jobs. And of course, I know people would like to be full-time employed, but especially in volatile economic times, it's not a bad idea to have a few part-time jobs. For example, a company requires a geologist to carry out a mapping program over summer, because every experience you build up will really help your development. Sometimes it's also a good idea to think about sideways moves. For example, if you cannot obtain a specific position that you are aiming for, perhaps think about, can I do another job that's a bit on the side, but it will lead towards a bigger goal. So those are a number of aspects that I encourage you to think about. And I guess the next slide is really showing how this planning worked out for me personally. And again, as I said earlier, the slide we're going to take a look at now shows that, thinking 3 to 5 years ahead is not a bad idea. I can quickly talk you through how I did, how I spent the last 10 years or so. So the first one here, after graduation, I worked for a company called Navtex, and this company now has been acquired by Halliburton, and that was really about producing a number of desktop studies as a junior geologist. And at first I thought, oh, why am I sitting in front of a computer? I'm really interested in going out into the field. I'm really keen to do this field work and work on mine sites, etc. But looking back, carrying out desk studies in some remote part of Russia was a very interesting experience, and helped me to increase my ability to write reports. And that's very common and very important skill to have in mining, to be able to write reports and concisely summarize your thoughts. After this year at Neftex, I took up a job at Rio Tinto Exploration. And my first posting for a couple of years was in Namibia, in Southern Africa. And I was involved there in brownfields drilling. So we were carrying out a large resource upgrade drilling program around a mine site there. And that was really good because I got exposed to drilling techniques. That is not something that's commonly taught at university. So it was a bit of a drop into the cold water. Learning about drilling, as drilling is the main exploratory technique and evaluation technique in mining, that's a good thing to do early in your career if you can. You can see on this timeline that the knowledge gain after sitting a few years on a drill rig sort of plateaued at some point. And that was like after 2.5, 3 years. And then I got a move to this Zambian copper belt, where the task was slightly different. It was more about greenfields target generation. So coming up with conceptual targets and then testing them in the field by drilling, source sampling, and supervising exploration teams. And that is a bit different from brownfields drilling, but the skills are very similar. Okay, so it was again quite a bit of drilling and evaluation of greenfields prospects. Around that time, I started to come up with ideas for short courses, and that was to, in my opinion, I wanted to educate students in drilling techniques, as I've done a few years earlier there in Namibia. Because I felt that at university, drilling is not always covered at great detail. So I designed these short courses, which then led into my current job at the Camborne School of Mines. And from here on, I'm lecturing, disseminating knowledge, write publications, and do my own exploration projects and consulting as well. So you can see throughout these 10 years, lots of different things have happened. And I wouldn't have expected 10 years ago what I'm doing now. So there's no point, in my opinion, to think so 10, 20 years in advance. Think about yourself. What do you want to do in 3 to 5 years' time? What do you want to achieve, and what should be your aim? And I think that's probably the best way to progress your career. So how do you get started? As I said previously, you should build up strong knowledge in applied geology. Think about, again, what interests you, what excites you. What is the sector you would like to work in? Is it mining or exploration, or oil and gas? Or are you interested in the environmental, geoscience, or geotechnical sector? Or are you interested in running a job in finance or completely elsewhere? I also find it very, very important to start building a network as soon as possible. As a student, has probably not occurred to me back in the day, but looking back, having a good working network is essential to drive your career in the mining industry. And it's not just engineers or geologists you want to connect with, it's also lawyers or human resources people, because a living network can help you in a number of occasions. Probably at this stage, you should also think about writing a cover letter and a resume or CV. I think that's the same paperwork. And you should start to look and apply for jobs. And that's what we're talking about in the following slides. So perhaps now is a good time to get interactive. I think we've got a poll question for you. So Deanne, could you shoot up this the poll? So here you find a question, and if you're in a job at the moment, perhaps choose from these options here and take your pick in how you found your latest job. And we can take a look at what's a common trend and how we can interpret that. So I just wait for maybe a few seconds, sorry. And if Deanne is ready, maybe you can show us the results, please. Great. So we have about 107 participants on the call, and we can clearly see there's a winner here, and it appears that your current job, you got 38% of you have found it through networking. I think it just emphasizes what I said 2 minutes ago, that networking is absolutely vital in starting and advancing your career in the minerals industry. Well done, those of you. We can also see job search websites is featuring at a high 13%. Society job boards and internships, 5 to 7%. Oops, my light just went off there. I'll continue like this. So great. Let's take a look at what I came up with, where you can find jobs. Oops. Maybe Deanne, can you bring us back to the slide here, please? Yeah, thank you. Okay, here we go. My recommendations usually are to start off your website search with websites. Your jobs you started off with websites. A few of the common ones are earthworks-jobs.com. That is one of the classic websites I've seen over the years. They post everything from industry jobs to governmental jobs to academic jobs. It's a great way to start. Jobs for Mining has also been present. And of course, infomine.com. I think, in my opinion, they probably have the largest job board for mining-related employment. So I urge you to take a look at what they post there. That's just as a starter, looking at websites. You may want to look into magazines like the Mining Journal, for example. I think that's a subscription only, but they usually list jobs available. You can look into the job boards of societies. The FSEG has a job board, and there are numerous jobs on there, ranging from academic positions to jobs in industry. And you could specifically search for companies. So say, for example, you heard about, I don't want to give any biased company name here, but if you hear about a certain company, you may want to Google it, check out their job boards and apply from there. You can also ask if you're at university, you can ask your professor or tutor. They all have their networks and know colleagues in industry. That's a very good source if you're still a student. And if you have industry contacts, remember networking is vital. If you have industry contacts, they may not necessarily give you a job, but they may know someone else who is in a position to hire. And I think the poll just earlier showed quite clearly that networking is very important. Okay, I think we arrived at our first Q&A session. I'm accessing here the Q&A list. We've got a number of questions, and I'm trying my best to answer those. There's one question about which are the best universities to pursue a PhD in economic geology in the US. Well, there are certainly a number of them. I don't want to be biased towards any, but some that ring a bell are the Colorado School of Mines or the New Mexico School of Mines. You may also want to check out Canada. There are a number of interesting mining schools in Ontario and in British Columbia. We have another question about what reputable mining school the mining industry, sorry, I need to rephrase this. Is the mining industry aware of a reputable mining school? And if I can specify that? Yep, the mining industry definitely has links to some of the world famous schools, and I think I just mentioned some in the US. The Australian mining industry, they also have their links to mining schools in Perth. In Europe, you've got the mining schools in Austria, that's Leoben. You've got one in Freiburg. You've got one in Finland and in the UK, where I'm from. I hope that answered the question. And let's go for one more question here. What do you think about the geology of Namibia? I absolutely love it. It's great. Zero vegetation and interesting deposits. So that I hope answered that question. I think we have to move on for now. There will be a next Q&A session in a short while. Just move back to the talk. Hang on. Okay, let's take a look at cover letters and resumes or CVs. In my opinion, you can find on the web hundreds of books describing how to apply for a job and write a perfect CV. I'm just going to give you here a number of facts from experience that may help you cover these topics. I recommend the following strategy for applications. You need to write a cover letter outlining your interest for a certain job, and you also need to compile a resume. That's often sent by email or actually uploaded to a company-specific job site. Not very often I have heard that classic traditional mail delivered applications are accepted. You can call people directly and inquire about jobs or your application. And as I said before, I recommend you be proactive if there's a time lag between your application and hearing back from a company. So if it's more than 3 or 4 weeks, I think there's no harm to follow up with people and politely inquire what where your application is at. A cover letter, and what I'm talking about here now is probably more the Anglo-American type of writing a cover letter in CV. It might be completely different in other parts of the world. However, from my experience, it worked quite well to have a cover letter and CV compiled in a way that I'm describing here. In a cover letter, you would like to introduce yourself and expand on the CV or resume that you are attaching to it. So you start off with a number of paragraphs talking about the job you are applying for and why you are interested about it. You can see here on the first paragraph, you state why you are writing the letter. And importantly, the cover letter really covers and allows you to sell yourself, sell your skills and your experience. And that is a very important way of verbalizing probably some of the bullet points you're having in a CV, where you can really expand on some of the key experiences you had. A very good tip that a friend gave me a few years ago is that you should always try to make every sentence in your cover letter hard-hitting. Every sentence needs to be really be tailored towards what the company is requiring from the applicant. So you need to answer each of these categories that the company is searching for. In your CV, it's just a quick overview. You can, of course, write a timeline CV, or you can write a CV listing your skills. There are 2 different approaches. I prefer the timeline version, but it might be different in other parts of the world. What I find important is that you should have almost like a key attributes in a personal statement at the very beginning of the CV, because that is catching the eyes of recruiters. So come up with 2 or 3 sentences summarizing who you are and what you want to achieve, or what you are looking for. Okay, if recruiters look through hundreds of CVs, that's a good way to get their attention by having such a statement. You would also, in terms of economic geology, want to elaborate on fieldwork experience. As we know, it's important to see many rock types and see many mineral deposits. So if you, during your career or during your studies, have visited a number of metallogenic belts, please include that. So if you apply for the job, you can either send this by email or upload to a job portal. don't forget that it takes time to process sometimes hundreds of applications. So there might be a delay in hearing back from a company. If you're indeed successful, you're often then invited for a telephone interview or personal interview. And it depends on the company. Sometimes this has a number of different stages. For example, you could run an assessment center as the final assessment tool, basically. If you are successful, of course, you get a job offer, and that's really good. But you should also check the contract, and we're going to talk about making sure about contracts in a short while. Perhaps from another perspective, if you are a fresh graduate, it's not always possible to negotiate the big bucks, right? Because graduate schemes, they usually have specific bands, pay bands or salary bands that you automatically move into. Great. A few tips about preparing yourself for the interview. I think a big aspect here is that you prepare yourself and research the company you're going to apply for. You can gather some information on the company, on the projects, on the finances of the company. It can be done through the web and through newspapers, etc. An important point that I'd like to make here is that it's not just the company asking you questions. Very often, the people who interview you will allow you to ask questions. And that's a really good way of showing interest in the company and showing that you've done your homework. But also, of course, to inquire about what the job will entail and what the specifics are. I guess some of these other bullet points I have here, they're common sense, I guess, but I've been in interviews where exactly this didn't happen, such as people didn't dress appropriately and people arrived late. You just want to avoid this because I don't think it makes a good impression. During the interview, and I guess that depends wherever you're based and what part of the world, usually, just rules of politeness and, stay calm during the interview, but be focused. And I would say, see the interview as a experience for yourself to improve, right? It's nothing to be afraid about. Perhaps at some point later you can even enjoy those. Watch the body language and ask questions if you get the time to, such as work times, benefits, travel, and so on. It's always important to follow up an interview. You can, after the interview, think about and reflect how it went. If you like the company you applied for, do you like what they have on offer? Keep in touch with HR. You can send polite emails thanking for the possibility to attend the interview. You can either write a note to people, or you send an individual or group email. I guess group emails to the people who interviewed you is probably quite appropriate. And again, don't forget that you should be proactive and not just think about one application, but have a whole number of applications to choose from during your application process. Last very important point I would like to bring across is that if you receive a job offer, that's really great. It's a good job, but importantly here, you should try and get a good package sorted. And working in the minerals industry can be quite specific at times, such as the working schedules. It's no secret that in certain parts of the world, geologists, they work on long, irregular schedules. For example, in Africa, some people spend 12 weeks, so 3 months in the field, and get 2 weeks holiday after that. Whilst over in Australia, if you're lucky, you get a 5 days on, 2 days off roster. So that is important to check in advance what a company offers you. Think about the salary and benefits, and also think about what else the company has on offer, such as perhaps do they have private health insurance, do they offer you pension or shares, and of course important regular flights or travel home if you're working stints and long assignments. And finally, remember that you are of value to a company, right? You bring your experience, you bring your knowledge. So yeah, let me almost stop with this. Just as a lookout for next webinar that we will be holding in about 4 weeks' time. I will be speaking and talking about how you can gather and advance your skills in the minerals industry. Okay, so there are a number of explosions moving in. You can see that advancing your knowledge can range from attending seminars, reading books, shadowing senior colleagues on the job. All of these topics we will take a look at during the next webinar, and I will try and give you a better understanding of what are the different ways to improve your CPD and your own professional development. Great, I think we're almost there. We've got another Q&A session, final Q&A session coming up. Let's take a look at the questions we have, and there are so many questions. I'm sorry, I have to pick a few. Here's an interesting one. How difficult is it for a European citizen to get a working visa for a job in industry in Canada, USA, Australia? Let me answer this one. So Australia should not be a problem if you can be on the work and travel permit. That allows you to, I think, up to 1 or 2 years to find a job, and after that, a company needs to sponsor you. In Canada and the USA, I think it's a bit more difficult. Well, I'm not an HR person, but I can say that you need an invitation as a European citizen from a company to work over there. So I guess most of my graduates, they've recently departed to Australia, and I found it pretty easy to get a job there. That seems to be booming at the moment. Another question here. What are the best places and ways to network as a university student, specifically as an undergrad? Super question. Well, there are a number of opportunities here. You can start, of course, at university events. Perhaps your department has guest speakers coming in from overseas, and they give an hour-long talk about what they're doing in industry. So you may want to attend these talks and meet new people. You can also, of course, join a society such as the FSEG or student chapter, and through that you have you have lots of opportunities to meet other people of different student chapters and get to know like-minded people. What's happening here in the UK as well is we have so-called mining sundowners. There are some of them around the country, and during these mining sundowners, students, academics, and industry professionals, they meet up in a pub and get to know each other, discuss what they're doing. So depending on where you are located, I would recommend you to look out for those and attend those sundowners. That's a really good way of meeting new people. Right, let me scroll through a few other questions. There's an interesting one here about if a student wants to start a career in exploration, is it better to start with a summer job inside a mine or an exploration team? Well, what can I say about this? I guess as a student, if you have the chance to work in industry, that is beneficial as such. It really depends on where you see yourself. If you want to work in exploration, try and look for an exploration company. If you want to work at a mine site, try a job there. I think that's what I can say about it. It probably depends on, again, the location you are at. If there are plenty of mine sites around, then probably it's quite easier to find an internship locally. All right, let's go for one more question. We're slightly running over time. Okay, here's one. Junior or major mining companies to start. So let me rephrase that. Is it better to start with a junior or major mining company? That is quite an interesting and widely debated question. I showed you earlier on my graph that I started to work with a major company. I felt that this was a very good start because a major company has a broadly based logistical support that will help you to really experience different sides of a business. You maybe can rotate through different locations, and a company might have enough money to put you in a graduate program. If you start with a junior company, however, you might not necessarily have this logistical support. But on the other side, you have instantly many different opportunities to get your skills up to shape and learn a lot in a very short amount of time. So it's in a way difficult to answer your question. I would personally tend towards working for a major mining company, but equally, it's absolutely fine if you start a job with a junior company, because that fast tracks your own organizational skills and your responsibilities tremendously. I think, okay, one more question here is coming up. What do you think about graduate programs? Graduate programs, in my opinion, either work or they don't. Good graduate programs will allow recent graduates to move around different mine sites. That's what I just was alluding to earlier. Perhaps you can be rotating every 3 months to a new place. However, graduate programs that don't work, they will have you placed at one location for a long time, and it's probably not as beneficial. So it absolutely depends on the company you are looking for. But usually, if you run through such a 2 or 3 year program, let's say you're ready to be released into taking up responsibility and further jobs down the line. Great. I'm really happy to see so many questions coming up. My apologies if I couldn't answer all of those, but I hope that with the questions that I answered, it was I got you a better idea of the role and responsibilities of a geologist and how you find a job in mining. Okay, I think we're arriving at the end of our webinar today. I just want to give you a bit of a few closing statements and outlook for next month. Next month, we're going to talk a bit more about the academic education and master's programs. So really the skills that you can pick up at university to have a successful career in mining. We will be looking at the importance of improving your skills throughout your career. So it's usually not done with you do a training course next year and then you don't do anything else, because career is about lifelong learning. Right, we're going to talk about this, about CPD. We are going to look into geological associations and student chapters. And we critically going to talk about soft skills. So what are employers looking for? And how can you get these geological and interpersonal skills that are expected of you when you start and progress your career in the mining industry. Great. You've got my contact details here in case you have any further questions. I would like to thank you all very much for staying on, for attending the webinar. And I'm hoping that with the following 3 webinars, which will cover skill sets and critical topics that you should know in working in the minerals industry, that these will equally be of interest to you, and that we meet again in the following months. All right, thank you very much, and I hand over to Deanne now.
Great, thanks, Benedikt. And then just as a reminder for everyone, the next webinar is on October 17th. Registration is open. You can see that using the web link down below. And a quick reminder, you will see a survey that pops up. We'd really appreciate your feedback to let us know what you think and where we can improve. And with that, I hope to see you in October.